Before we jump into this review, I just want to add, I did cover this in my Lynx review. The conditions weren't the best. I'm only able to kind of ride in this field, and it's kind of an icy top layer with almost like a mashed potatoes type layer underneath, but it did allow me to try these engines and get a little bit of a feel for these chassis. This is obviously a very quick drive, but I hope you guys can still find some value in it like always, and here's the video. Alright, 650 launch edition, so haven't ridden one of these before. Say the Polarises do feel very light. Everything about them, light steering, light chassis. Coming off the Lynx, it's interesting to feel how light the steering is. Like, you can turn slow speed no problem. So had I gotten a Matryx, I was going to get this color combo, so kind of cool to see it in person. This is an Indy XC 650 Launch Edition. So base gauge, it's got the Walker Evans Force shocks, so not the Velocity shocks, but seems to ride pretty good. 650 power feels really good. It feels so similar to the 800 Clean Fire, and I'm glad I just got done riding one of those this weekend, so I can pretty easily say that it feels similar. This does have a pre-studded track. I would say that's an 1.25 inch ice ripper, it looks like, not any sort of like ice cobra. But yeah, feels good. The bodywork is definitely narrower in general. Obviously that was the whole point of it. Interesting to see the console design and kind of live with that. You do feel super far forward on the sled, like a lot different than the Axys sleds, but it's a pretty good design, and I could see it working very well for people. Feels great as far as like a trail machine goes. Interesting to try it on like a crossover, but definitely can't complain. Everything else feels pretty natural, you know. Don't really get to try the gauge because it doesn't have it, but yeah, pretty decent little machine. Power feels good. I know Gary from Mudbrats would love to hear that, so if you're looking for that 700 type power, man, it's a good option. So something really cool that ended up just kind of working out was within a week of each other, I rode an Indy XC 129 in the Axys chassis, and I rode the Indy XC Launch Edition in the Matryx chassis. Like I said, both 129 sleds. The Axys chassis had the 1.3 Cobra track on it. The Launch Edition had the 1.25 Ice Ripper, so a little bit of a difference there, but otherwise very comparable sleds. In the Axys chassis, the 129 felt very short as far as length went, and then very tall as far as height went. When you got in the Matryx chassis, a lot of that height went away, and it made the sled overall feel much more stable and much more controllable. When I was riding it in the Axys chassis, I felt like if I was to catch an edge, the sled was going to totally just kind of tip over. So I kind of was a little bit more nervous riding it and kind of preparing more for corners. With the Matryx, it felt like it was super confidence inspiring. If I wanted to move way forward and kind of get my body over either shock on the left or the right, there was enough shape in the panel to be able to do so. And I was already kind of more forward on the sled, so it was kind of already sending me in that direction anyway. It kind of blew my mind for me that the seat on the Axys was something I never thought much about. I liked it. It did its job. I thought it was a very solid seat. And now riding the Procross, the G4, and especially the Matryx, I can see how wide that seat was and how much room it took up between your legs. It definitely kind of hampered moving your legs back and forth on the chassis. being that half an inch taller, I thought the benefits of the riding position would outweigh any sort of tippiness. But taking that half an inch out, I didn't see any sort of real big negatives as far as riding position went, and the center of gravity feels way better on the sled, so I gotta give it to Polaris on that. An interesting thing I did experience came down to the body panels. So with the Axys, you're on the sled in a very neutral position. It's not really forcing you to do any one thing. When you get on the Matryx sleds, they're much more rider forward in my opinion, and that kind of comes into where it almost fits you like a glove and doesn't quite give you as many options as far as where you can sit. Yes, you can move back, but the steering column feels farther forward, so it feels like when you do sit back, you're kind of not making the most of the sled and you're kind of riding it almost wrong in my opinion, or that's how it felt for me at least. The angle on the side panels almost feels like a modern rev, like your knees are kind of bent and you're kind of being pulled forward into the cab of the sled. It definitely allows you to handle the sled better than the Axys, but with the Axys, I think it was a much more neutral sled, almost like the Pro Cross in that way. It kind of lets you sit where you want to. The Matryx feels a little bit of kind of that G4 type thing where it kind of is telling you where to go. So as far as all that goes, it just kind of comes down to what you prefer. If you're the type of person that wants to be able to kind of sit back and kind of not be forced to sit any one way, the Matryx might be a little difficult for you. Like my dad comes to mind with that. He kind of likes to be able to lay back when he wants to. He does lean off the sides when we're going down, certain trails, but once he gets tired, he wants to be able to kind of sit back and relax, and I feel like the Matryx would be harder on him. Whereas with the Axys, you can lean forward if you want. You can't get as far forward by any means, so you're kind of capped out as far as that goes. I don't think you'll ever get the Axys to handle quite as good as the Matryx in the tight corners, but it does kind of allow you to sit more neutrally if you want, and then there is still that ability to move forward without the farther forward steering column and the angle of the panels kind of pulling you towards the front of the sled, so to speak. Power-wise, I was super surprised. Up to like 3/4 throttle, the 650 Patriot and the 800 Clean Fire honestly feel almost identical. You don't get that super burst of speed anywhere like the 850 Patriot has, but I think in almost every riding situation, with the exception of super long straightaways and like lake running, you're going to basically be getting 800 type performance out of the 650. In a video I have coming up later, I was able to compare the 600 Clean Fire and the 6000 C-Tech from Articat. Where you start to feel those engines kind of plane off, this engine just keeps pulling. Up to like 3/4 throttle, it feels like an 800 class sled. At that point, like I said before, you do feel it start to plane off a little bit, but Polaris has always built a very lively 600 in my opinion. I think it's much more lively even in the 600 Clean Fire than the 6000 C-Tech, and then this sled takes it to the next level. It does have smooth clutching, so in my opinion you can definitely gradually roll into it. You're not kind of being forced to have like a very throttle happy experience. If you want to roll into it, you can. If you want to take off quick, you just punch a little more throttle and you're going. So I think this does do a lot of things great. And it's definitely going to kind of open up a new window in the market, and I'll be curious to see how other manufacturers respond to it. Once again, just want to say a huge thanks to Bibbins. Jeff makes it so easy for me to come do these demo rides. Unfortunately, I was a little short on time today, so there was only so much I could do, but super happy I got to try a Matryx and a 650. If you guys are in my area and you're looking for a Skidoo or a Polaris product, definitely check them out. Ask for Jeff. He's the man, and they can definitely hook you guys up.